In this video series, we're tackling the question of identity. And in the previous video, I talked about options of how you can decide one's identity. You can let others decide, or you can decide for yourself. And as I examined, there's pros and cons to each one. But in the end, we all want a stable and worthwhile identity that protects us from shame. And now I want to discuss the final option for identity formation, and that is you let God decide. In Romans 5:8, it says, "But God shows his love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." In this passage, the Apostle Paul explains how faith and identity work together. See, we need something outside of ourselves to determine our controlling self-understanding, otherwise it's too unstable. But we also need something that protects us from shame. In Romans 5, Paul says it's reasonable for a person to sacrifice his or her life for a righteous person. But God is merciful beyond reason, and he gives his son Jesus for an unrighteous person, someone who has something to be ashamed of. So God, through the death and resurrection of his son, Jesus Christ, becomes the better covering for our shame and therefore our controlling self-understanding. And what this does is it restores the intention God had for us in the very beginning, back in the Garden of Eden. See, we're made in the image of God, which means we have feelings and desires that ultimately originated from him as our creator. And yet the world isn't perfect. We aren't perfect. And due to evil and shame, we have feelings and desires that started out as good, but have been corrupted. And that's why letting God decide our identity is so powerful. Because we need someone who fully knows us, the darkest parts of ourselves, and also fully accepts us at the same time. To be fully known and to be fully accepted is what love is. And Jesus shows that even in our darkest, most shameful moments, that God cannot love us anymore. As I mentioned, one collaborator joining with me on this journey of wrestling with identity is Andrew Bunt and his book, Finding Your Best Identity. As a child, Andrew thought he might be a girl born in a boy's body. And then later in life, he discovered that he's same-sex attracted. Andrew was bombarded by messages that his sexuality was his identity. But in his journey letting God decide his controlling self-understanding, he realized that God made sexuality for a relationship, not just this brief, fleeting physical connection, but that it's ultimately about connecting with God. Sexuality is designed for us to understand Christ's love for the church, for the body of Christians. And the beauty of Christ's love is God sees how our desires can get perverted and shameful, and yet he loves us anyway so that our desires and feelings can be restored to their original intention. So if you're wrestling with how to decide your identity, could you begin exploring what it means to let God decide and take a deeper look at his love and why it's the most powerful and compelling way to determine one's identity? To believe in this love is the best controlling self-understanding we could ever have. And to know the love of Christ in the depths of our hearts is what it means to live faith first.